Mariana Trench by Michael Woods and Mary B. Woods. Many people know the highest point on Earth is at the top of Mount Everest. That famous peak towers 29,035 feet above sea level. It is in the Himalayan mountains near the border of China and Nepal. But how many people can name the lowest place in the world? That point is at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, a valley in the floor of the Pacific Ocean. The trench lies just east of the Mariana Islands, southeast of China and Japan. This enormous trench extends for about 1,554 miles, from one end to the other. It could stretch from New York City almost to Denver, Colorado. The trench averages about 45 miles wide. A person walking at a brisk pace would need about 10 hours to go from one side to the other. Inside that grove in the ocean floor is the Challenger Deep, the deepest spot in the world. It lies 210 miles from the island of Guam. It is about 36,000 feet below sea level, almost 7 miles deep. If Mount Everest were placed in the Challenger Deep, the mountain peak would still be under 7,000 feet of water. Weird creatures. Conditions are very harsh at the summit of Mount Everest. Temperatures average negative 33 degrees Fahrenheit. And winter winds howl at more than 100 miles an hour. Yet climbers have reached the top and lived to tell about it. But no human, not even an expert diver, could survive the environment of the Challenger Deep. In this pitch-black world, the temperature is about 36 degrees Fahrenheit. The human body shuts down quickly in water that cold. A person on the ocean floor also would be crushed by the weight of the water. Water is heavy. A 1-gallon milk jug holds about 8 pounds of water. At the deepest point in the ocean, water would press down with a weight heavier than hundreds of elephants. Ever wonder, why is it pitch dark in the deep ocean? In the ocean, deeper means dimmer. Water absorbs and scatters sunlight, so little light remains after 660 feet. Beyond that depth is a twilight zone, where the human eye cannot see colors. This zone of faint light goes down to about 3,300 feet. The midnight zone from there on down is in total darkness. However, living things do thrive in the Mariana Trench. Some creatures look like deep-sea movie monsters or survivors from prehistoric times. These animals and plants are specifically built for life in an extreme environment. Some can produce a glowing light like fireflies. This is called bioluminescence. Creatures use this light to attract prey. Anglerfish have bioluminescent, built-in fishing poles. In some of these fish, the pole is like an antenna growing from the top of the head. This rod glows in the dark water. The anglerfish waves it to attract other fish. When a fish approaches, the angler snaps up the prey in its huge mouth packed with long, needle-sharp teeth. Flashlight fish also live in the Mariana Trench. Like the anglerfish, they are bioluminescent. The flashlight fish lurks in the dark water and turns its light on and off. When a curious fish approaches, it becomes dinner. Certain types of crabs and bacteria thrive in the Mariana Trench. Scientists had never seen some of these until fairly recent deep-sea explorations. This is because the creatures can't exist anywhere else. The extreme temperatures and pressure of the deep ocean are vital to these organisms. Challenger looks deep. The Mariana Trench was discovered in 1875. Scientists on the British ship HMS Challenger used a machine to measure the ocean depth in different places. The machine unreeled a spool of wire with a heavy weight at the end. Dials measured the length of wire let out. When the wave touched bottom, scientists could tell the depth of the ocean floor. With that simple method, they realized that the water near the Mariana Islands was extremely deep. In 1951, the British Royal Navy vessel HMS Challenger 2 returned to the area with a modern measuring device. It is called echo sounding or sonar. It sends out sound waves that bounce off a surface, such as the seafloor. Scientists measured the time needed for sound waves to bounce back from the seafloor to the ship. This told them the ocean depth. Using echo sounding, Challenger 2 mapped the entire Mariana Trench. The deepest point it found was 35,760 feet. The point was named the Challenger Deep after the ship. The moon over Mariana. 12 U.S. astronauts have been on the moon. They explored the moon's surface in the 1960s and 1970s during the Apollo space program. However, only 2 people have ever visited the deepest place on Earth. Don Walsh, bottom right, and Jacques Piccard, top right, spent just 20 minutes there during their descent in the Trieste submersible in 1960. People got their first glimpse of the Challenger Deep in 1960. That year, scientist Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh traveled to the bottom. They rode in the Trieste, a submersible vehicle. Small submarines of this kind are built to withstand extreme underwater pressure. They usually carry scientific instruments for exploring the deep ocean. Piccard and Walsh found a point deeper than Challenger 2 had found it. It was 35,813 feet below the surface. They also observed small fish near the ocean floor. Since the oceanographers have used other vehicles and instruments to explore the deep ocean, some are remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs. Scientists control these through cables from a ship on the surface. Others are autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs. These explore on their own without any connection to another ship. AUVs navigate with onboard computers and record data from the areas they explore. In the 1960s, several Japanese ROVs explored the Mariana Trench. They observed shrimp, sandworms, and other living things. The ROV Kyoki scooped up samples of mud from the trench floor for scientists to study. Scientists found tiny organisms in those samples that are Earth's deepest living creatures. Plates so deep. The Mariana Trench is so deep because of movements in Earth's surface. Many huge plates of rock make up the surface. Earth's crust or outer layer forms the top of each plate. The bottom of each plate is part of Earth's mantle, the thick layer below the crust. The plates float on a layer of putty-like rock in the mantle. While floating, the edges of these plates slide past one another and bump into one another. At the Mariana Trench, a heavy plate of rock on the ocean floor is pressing against a plate of lighter rock. When this happens, the heavier ocean plate plunges downward at a steep angle into Earth's mantle. The bottom of the Mariana Trench is where the heavy plate of rock is moving down into the mantle. Plate movements have formed more than 20 other deep ocean trenches in different parts of the world. The Puerto Rico Trench, for instance, is the deepest place in the Atlantic Ocean. It lies north of the island of Puerto Rico. The trench is about 5 miles deep and 1,100 miles long. Mariana Trench Expressway. Navy submarines patrolling the world's oceans like to stay in deep water. It is more difficult for enemies to detect them there. That's why U.S., Russian, and other submarines often use the Mariana Trench as an expressway. The trench is the main north-south route for submarines in the Pacific Ocean. Worries about the wonder. The future of the Mariana Trench seems very safe. Neither people nor nature threaten its existence. Ships sailing over the area do not cause any damage to the trench. However, movements of Earth's place may eventually change the Mariana Trench. In millions of years it may be deeper or shallower, but is sure to remain a wonder that holds many secrets of the deep. Exploring Challenger Deep. After the Challenger Deep was discovered in 1875, explorers were anxious to visit this deepest point in the ocean. On January 23, 1960, an American submarine naval officer, Don Walsh, and a Swiss scientist, Jacques Piccard, traveled there in a U.S. Navy battleship named Trieste. This undersea research vehicle had 5-inch thick steel walls that would not crack under the extreme pressure so far below the ocean surface. In Trieste's very cramped space, Walsh and Piccard spent 5 hours descending 35,814 feet. At the bottom, they relayed their depth to their team. They were 70 miles down. The bright headlight of their vehicle allowed them to see a foot-long flatfish and shrimp outside the porthole. Until then, no one had known that life existed in the Challenger Deep. After less than 30 minutes, the men unloaded the ballast and floated upward. More than 3 hours later, they reached the surface. After this exploration, there were only 2 unmanned submarines that visited the Challenger Deep until March 25, 2012. That was when filmmaker James Cameron reached the bottom in the deep-sea Challenger. It took his tiny vehicle 2 hours and 36 minutes to make the descent. He was able to explore the seafloor for a few hours. He took video and collected samples from the ocean floor. In May 2019, business Victor Vescova reached the bottom of the Challenger Deep in a submarine called DSV Limiting Factor. During 4 hours on the seabed, Vescova collected samples and may have discovered 4 new species. On board his support ship was Don Walsh, back for another look at this marvel of nature.